He left me for a younger woman and told me I was nothing without him. I was 39 years old, and after 17 years of marriage, I watched my husband pack his bags and walk out of the home we had built together. He didn't even look back. He said she made him feel young again. I begged him to reconsider. He laughed. That night, I thought my life was over. But what my husband didn't know was that his decision had just forced me to uncover something I had been hiding from everyone, even from him. And when he finally discovered the truth, he would realize he hadn't left behind the woman he thought he knew. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, what city or state are you watching from? If you've ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted, tell me what you would have done in my situation. And if you want to hear how the story unfolds, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with me until the end. Because the night my husband walked away was only the beginning. Now let me take you back to where it all started. I'm leaving you for her. My husband said those 5 words so calmly that, for a few seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. I stood in our kitchen with one hand resting on the counter, staring at him across the room. It was a Tuesday night. Nothing about the evening had warned me that my marriage was about to end. Dinner was still sitting on the table. 2 plates, 2 glasses of iced tea. The chicken I had roasted after work was already getting cold, and my husband, Daniel, was standing beside the front door with a suitcase. Not a duffel bag, not an overnight bag, a suitcase, packed. I looked at it, then back at him. Who is she? He didn't answer immediately. That silence hurt more than the words that followed. Her name is Lauren. I swallowed. Lauren from your office. He nodded. I had heard that name before. Several times, actually. Lauren had joined Daniel's company about 8 months earlier. She was younger, confident, energetic, and apparently very good at her job. At first, I hadn't thought anything of her. Why would I? I was 39 years old. Daniel was 42. We had been married for 17 years. We had survived job losses, medical bills, family arguments, Christmases that went wrong, birthdays we couldn't afford, and years when we barely had enough money left after paying the mortgage. I thought that kind of history meant something. I thought 17 years meant something. Apparently, I was wrong. Daniel, I whispered, are you telling me you're leaving our marriage? He looked uncomfortable. Then his expression changed. It became almost annoyed. Yes. Just one word. No apology. No hesitation. I stared at him. Why? He sighed. You know why? No, I don't. You've changed. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Changed how? He looked me up and down. That look made me feel like a stranger in my own kitchen. You're not the woman you used to be. I felt something inside me crack. Neither are you. He ignored that. Lauren understands me. I looked toward the suitcase again. So that's it. Daniel said nothing. 17 years, I said. And you're throwing everything away because another woman understands you? She makes me feel alive. My chest tightened. Then he said the sentence that stayed in my head for weeks afterward. She makes me feel young again. I looked at him for a long moment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the dinner plate against the wall. I wanted to ask him how many nights I had stayed awake beside him when he was sick. How many times I had canceled plans because he needed me. How many sacrifices I had made so he could accept promotions, change jobs, and chase opportunities. Instead, I asked the smallest question I could think of. Do you love her? Daniel looked away. That was my answer. I sat down at the kitchen table. My hands were shaking. I hated that he could see it. I hated even more that part of me was still hoping he would come back, sit across from me, and tell me this had all been some horrible mistake. But he didn't. He picked up his suitcase. Where are you going? I'm staying with Lauren for now. I looked at him sharply. For now. He nodded. That was when I realized something. He hadn't made this decision that night. He had been planning it. Maybe for weeks. Maybe longer. How long? Daniel frowned. What? How long have you been planning to leave me? He didn't answer. I stood up. Daniel, please don't do this. Do what? Make this harder. I stared at him. You're the one who came into this kitchen with a suitcase. He rubbed his forehead. I didn't want to hurt you. I almost whispered, you don't get to say that. He looked at me. For the first time that night, I saw something resembling guilt in his eyes. Then it disappeared. I've made my decision. He walked toward the door. I followed him. Not because I wanted to beg. At least, that's what I told myself. I followed him because 17 years of marriage didn't feel like something a person could simply walk away from. Daniel! He stopped. I stood several feet behind him. Are you really willing to throw away everything we built? He turned around. Yes. That single word destroyed whatever hope I had left. He opened the door. Cold evening air came into the house. Then he looked at me one last time. I think you'll be better off without me. And he walked away. I stood there until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. The door slowly swung shut. Click! That sound was so ordinary. Yet it felt like the end of my life. I didn't cry immediately. I walked back into the kitchen. I stared at the 2 plates. One untouched, one half-eaten. Then I picked up Daniel's plate and carried it to the sink. I don't know why. Maybe because doing something normal was easier than accepting what had just happened. I washed the dishes. I wiped the counter. I put the leftovers into a container. I even folded the kitchen towel. Then I stood alone in the silence. That's when I finally noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was an envelope underneath Daniel's chair. White. Unmarked. I picked it up. For a moment, I assumed it was something he had forgotten. But when I turned it over, I saw my name written across the front. My heart began pounding. The handwriting wasn't Daniel's. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it before. Several times. At first, I couldn't understand why someone had written my name on an envelope that Daniel had apparently left behind. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I read the first line. Then I read it again. My hands went cold, because the document had nothing to do with Lauren. And suddenly, I realized my husband's decision to leave me might not have been the real story at all. There was something else happening. Something Daniel had desperately hoped I would never discover. And I was about to find out exactly what it was. The paper trembled between my fingers. I read the first line again. Notice of intent to sell property. I stopped breathing. Our house. The house Daniel and I had bought 11 years earlier. The house where we had celebrated birthdays, hosted Thanksgiving, and spent countless ordinary evenings together. I stared at the signature near the bottom. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. I didn't sign this, I whispered. For 17 years, Daniel had handled most of our paperwork. Taxes, insurance, bank forms, anything complicated. Whenever I asked questions, he would smile and say, "Don't worry. I've got it." I had trusted him. That night, I finally understood how dangerous that trust could be. I opened our joint bank account. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then I noticed an $8,500 withdrawal. 3 days earlier, I scrolled down. Another transfer. $12,000. Then another. $6,400. My stomach tightened. I kept scrolling until I realized nearly $47,000 had disappeared from our accounts over several months. I stared at the screen. That money was supposed to be part of our savings. Our future. I called the bank. After answering several security questions, I asked about the transfers. The representative became cautious. "There is a business account connected to some of them," she said. "Whose business account?" She couldn't give me every detail, but she confirmed enough. The transfers were connected to a company. I hung up and sat in silence. Daniel had always talked about starting a consulting business someday. Apparently, someday had already happened. Then I remembered something from 6 months earlier. He had asked me to sign several documents. Just routine bank paperwork, he'd said. I had been late for work. I signed where he pointed. I suddenly felt sick. Maybe that was when I had unknowingly helped him. I went into our bedroom. Daniel's side of the closet was half empty. His watches were gone. His shoes were gone. He hadn't simply walked out. He had prepared to leave. Then I noticed something on his nightstand. A small black notebook. I knew I shouldn't open it. I opened it anyway. The first pages contained ordinary notes. Phone numbers. Appointments. Business expenses. Then I reached a page dated 3 months earlier. 4 words were written across the top. Get her to sign. Below them were 3 more lines. House. Savings. Divorce. My hands went cold. I turned the page. There were notes about lawyers and transferring money. Then I saw Lauren's name. Underneath it, Daniel had written, "She believes the story." I stared at those words. What story? I turned another page. Nothing. Another. Nothing. On the final page, there was one sentence. Once she leaves, everything becomes easier. I couldn't understand what he meant. Leave the house. Leave the marriage. Or something else. The next morning, I called my sister, Melissa. She arrived before 9. She read the documents without saying a word. When she finished, she looked at me. You need a lawyer. I know. And don't call Daniel. I wasn't planning to. That was the first decision I made without asking myself what Daniel would want. That afternoon, I met with Karen Whitmore, a family law attorney. I showed her everything. The forged signature, the bank transfers, the notebook. She studied each document carefully. How long have you been married? 17 years. Children? 1 daughter. Emma. She's 15. Karen nodded. Then she looked at the forged signature. Did you sign this? No. Are you certain? Yes. She placed the document down. Then someone has been preparing to move assets without your knowledge. My throat tightened. Can he sell our house? Not legally if you're a joint owner. But we need to find out exactly what he's been doing. She asked about Daniel's business. I told her about the consulting company he'd mentioned. Karen searched through the records on her computer. A few minutes later, she turned the screen toward me. A company had been registered 6 months earlier. The owner wasn't Daniel. It was Lauren Mitchell. I felt my chest tighten. So it wasn't just an affair. They had built something together. Something connected to our money. Something that might involve our house. But Karen wasn't looking at Lauren's name. She was looking at another detail. This is interesting, she said. I leaned closer. What? Karen pointed to the filing date. Then she looked at me. This company was created before your husband ever told you he was unhappy. I felt a chill run through me. Daniel hadn't suddenly fallen in love with Lauren. He had been planning something long before he walked through our front door with that suitcase. Then Karen said something that changed the way I saw everything. I don't think Lauren is the person you should be most worried about. I looked at her. Why? Karen closed the folder. Because I think your husband made one very serious mistake. I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet, but as I left her office that afternoon, I realized something important. I was no longer waiting for Daniel to come back. I was starting to find out why he had wanted me gone in the first place. For the first time in 17 years, I woke up without Daniel beside me. The other half of the bed was cold. I stared at the empty pillow for several seconds before remembering everything. He had left. He had chosen Lauren, and he had apparently been planning something behind my back for months. I got out of bed and made coffee. My hands were steadier than they had been the night before. I wasn't calm. I was simply angry enough to think clearly. At 9 that morning, Karen called me. I found something else, she said. My stomach tightened. What? Come to my office. I arrived 20 minutes later. Karen had several documents spread across her desk. She pointed to one. This is the company registration for the business your husband created. I looked at it. The company was called Mitchell Strategic Solutions. Lauren Mitchell was listed as the owner. Daniel wasn't listed anywhere. That doesn't make sense, I said. Karen nodded. Exactly. She showed me another document. It was a bank record. A large deposit had been made into the company's account. The amount was $38,000. I recognized the date. It was the same week Daniel had told me we needed to tighten our budget. My mouth went dry. He took our money. It appears so. I leaned back. For years, I had believed Daniel was simply bad with money. Now I realized he had been moving it somewhere. But why put everything in Lauren's name? Karen didn't have an answer yet. We need to trace every transfer. How long will that take? A few days. I nodded. Then she looked at me seriously. There is one thing you need to do immediately. What? Don't confront him. I almost smiled. I wasn't planning to. Good. Because if he knows what we have found, he may move the remaining assets. I thought about the house, our savings, Emma. Everything suddenly felt fragile. That afternoon, I picked Emma up from school. She opened the car door and immediately noticed something was wrong. Mom! Yeah. Where's Dad? I gripped the steering wheel. He's staying somewhere else for a while. She stared at me. Did you guys fight? I wanted to tell her everything. But she was 15. She didn't need to carry the weight of her father's betrayal. We're having some problems. She looked out the window. Is he coming back? I couldn't answer. I don't know. She was quiet for several minutes. Then she asked, "Is there another woman?" My heart sank. "How did you know?" "I saw him texting someone." I turned toward her. "What?" Before, her voice became smaller. "Last week, I saw the name Lauren." I felt something inside me harden. So Emma had seen it too. Daniel hadn't even been careful enough to hide the affair from his own daughter. That evening, after Emma went upstairs, I sat alone in the living room. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "We need to talk." I stared at it. Then another message arrived. "Please don't make this ugly." I didn't respond. A minute later. "I still want things to be fair." Fair. The word almost made me laugh. He had taken money. He had tried to sell our house. He had forged my signature. And he wanted things to be fair. I turned my phone face down. The next morning, Karen called again. Her voice sounded different. "Are you sitting down?" "Yes." "We traced one of the largest transfers." "Where did it go?" "To a second account." "Whose?" There was a pause. "Your husband's." I frowned. "But I thought the company belonged to Lauren." "It does." "Then why would money move from Lauren's company into Daniel's account?" Karen exhaled. "That isn't the strangest part." She told me the account had been opened several months before. The money had then been transferred again. To another company. I asked for the name. Karen gave it to me. I wrote it down. Then I stopped. I knew that name. It wasn't a company I'd heard Daniel mention. It was a company I had heard my father mention years ago. I felt my stomach drop. "Karen, can you repeat that?" She did. I stared at the paper. There was no way. My father had died 7 years earlier. His business had been sold shortly after his death. At least, that's what I had been told. I suddenly remembered something. A conversation with my mother shortly after the funeral. She had said, "Your father wanted you to have something." I had assumed she meant a personal belonging. A watch. A photograph. Something sentimental. But when I asked her what she meant, she changed the subject. I had never brought it up again. Now I wondered why. I called my mother. She answered after several rings. "Hi, sweetheart." "Mom, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "Did Dad ever leave me anything besides his personal belongings?" She became silent. Too silent. "Mom, I don't think this is the right time." My heart started pounding. "Why?" Another pause. "Because your father specifically told me not to tell you until you were ready." "Ready for what?" She didn't answer. I stood up. "Mom, please." Finally, she whispered, "Your father didn't leave you money." I frowned. "Then what did he leave me?" Her voice trembled. "Ownership." I couldn't speak. "Ownership of what?" She began crying. And before she could answer, I heard another voice behind me. "Mom." I turned around. Emma was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and in her hand was an envelope. "Dad left this in my room." My heart stopped. "Why would Dad leave you an envelope?" Emma shook her head. "I don't know." I walked toward her. The envelope had my name on it. But this time, the handwriting was different. It wasn't Daniel's. It wasn't my mother's. And when I saw the return address, I realized whoever had sent it knew something about my family that Daniel had spent years trying to keep hidden. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of my father standing beside a man I had never seen before. On the back, there were only 6 words. "Ask your husband who this man is." I stared at the photograph for several seconds. My father was standing outside an office building, wearing the dark suit he always wore when meeting important clients. Beside him stood a man I didn't recognize. I turned the photograph over again. "Ask your husband who this man is." 6 words. No explanation. No name. No date. Just a question that suddenly made my entire family history feel different. "Mom," I said, "who is he?" My mother wiped her tears. "I don't know." I looked at her. "You're lying." She flinched. I had never spoken to my mother that way before. She looked down at the table. "Your father told me never to talk about him." "Why?" "Because he was afraid." "Of who?" She shook her head. "I don't know." I picked up the photograph. "Then why did someone send this to me?" My mother didn't answer. I left her house with more questions than answers. When I got home, Daniel had called 3 times. I didn't answer. Then he sent a message. "Please call me. This is getting out of control." I stared at those words. Getting out of control. For the first time, I wondered what Daniel was afraid of. I called Karen. I found something, I told her. I sent her a picture of the photograph. She called me back almost immediately. Where did you get this? Someone left it for me. Do you recognize the building? No. Can you send me the full resolution photo? I did. A few minutes later, Karen called again. I found the building. My heart began beating faster. Where? Chicago. I frowned. My father lived in Ohio. I know. Then why would he be in Chicago? Karen paused. Because the building belonged to a company your father had a connection with. What company? She gave me the name. I searched it online. The company had existed for more than 30 years. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. The company's current owner was the same man standing beside my father in the photograph. I zoomed in on his face. I still didn't recognize him. But the name was familiar. I had heard Daniel mention it once. Years ago. I called him. He answered after the second ring. Finally. Who is Robert Hale? Silence. I heard Daniel breathe. Why are you asking? I closed my eyes. Because I found a photograph of him with my father. Another silence. Then Daniel said quietly, Where did you get that? I felt a chill. He hadn't asked what photograph. He knew exactly what I was talking about. Answer me. You don't understand. Then explain it. I can't. Why? Because your father didn't want you to know. I gripped the phone. My father is dead. I know. Then tell me. Daniel's voice became tense. Please, just trust me. I almost laughed. Trust you. He didn't answer. You left me for another woman. I know. You moved our money. I didn't. You tried to sell our house. That's not what happened. And now you're telling me to trust you? His voice suddenly changed. You need to stop asking questions. I froze. What? You heard me. Are you threatening me? No. Then what are you doing? I'm warning you. Before I could respond, he hung up. I stood in the kitchen with the phone pressed against my ear. My husband had never spoken to me like that. Not once. Then my phone rang again. Karen, did you speak to Daniel? Yes. What did he say? He told me to stop asking questions. Karen became quiet. Then we need to move quickly. The next morning, Karen sent me another document. It was an old corporate record connected to my father's business. There was a name listed as a beneficiary. Mine. I stared at it. My name. Not my mother's. Not Daniel's. Mine. I called my mother. She finally admitted the truth. My father had created a private family trust before he died. He had never told me because he believed I would be pressured by people around me. Why didn't you tell me? Because your father asked me not to. Why? He said someone close to you might try to take it. My heart stopped. Someone close to me? Yes. Who? My mother began crying again. I don't know. But I knew what she was implying. I looked around my house. The pictures on the wall. The wedding photograph. The family photos. 17 years of memories. And suddenly, the person I had trusted most was the person I could no longer trust at all. That afternoon, Karen discovered something even stranger. The money Daniel had transferred wasn't simply sitting in Lauren's company. It had been moved through several accounts. And one of those accounts was connected to the same trust my father had created. I stared at Karen. Are you saying Daniel found my father's trust? I think so. But how? She looked at me. That is what we need to find out. I felt sick. Then she handed me one final document. It was a copy of a letter written by my father. The date was 6 months before his death. I read the first sentence. If you're reading this, then someone has finally discovered what I tried to protect you from. My hands began to shake. I looked at Karen. What did my father know? She didn't answer. I kept reading. The next sentence was even more frightening. And if Daniel is still in your life, do not trust him. I stopped. For several seconds, I couldn't move. My father had written my husband's name. Years before Daniel ever walked out. Years before Lauren. Years before I had any reason to doubt my marriage. And suddenly, the question wasn't why Daniel had left me. It was why my father had warned me about him in the first place. I read my father's letter 3 times. Each time, the same sentence seemed to become heavier. If Daniel is still in your life, do not trust him. I couldn't understand it. My father had known Daniel for more than 10 years before he died. They had shared dinners, Christmases, business conversations. My father had even called Daniel the son I never had. So why would he leave me a warning like this? I looked at Karen. There's something missing. What? My father wouldn't write this without explaining why. Karen nodded. Then let's find the rest of the letter. We searched through the documents my mother had given me. There were several pages, but the letter ended abruptly. The final page was missing. Karen noticed it too. This isn't complete. Where is the rest? I don't know. I immediately called my mother. She sounded frightened when I asked about it. I gave you everything I had. Mom, there's a page missing. I don't have it. Are you sure? Yes. I heard her take a breath. Your father kept important documents in a safe. Where? In his old office. I froze. His office had been locked since his death. My mother had never wanted anyone to enter it. Does anyone have a key? She hesitated. I thought you did. I don't. There was silence. Then she said, Daniel did. My stomach tightened. Why would Daniel have Dad's office key? I don't know. I hung up and called Karen. When I told her, she immediately said, Don't go there alone. 2 hours later, we were standing outside my father's old office. The building looked exactly as I remembered it. Dark brick, tall windows, a faded brass sign beside the entrance. I hadn't been inside since his funeral. Karen found a locksmith. Within minutes, the door opened. Dust covered almost everything. My father's desk was still there. His old leather chair. His bookshelf. Even the framed photograph of our family remained on the wall. I walked slowly toward the desk. For a moment, I was 15 again. My father was sitting there, telling me to finish my homework before going out with friends. I touched the desk. Then I noticed a small scratch near one of the drawers. The drawer was locked. The locksmith opened it. Inside were several folders, bank statements, legal documents, old contracts, and one envelope. My name was written on it. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was the missing page. I read it silently. Then my knees nearly gave out. My father had written about Daniel. Not about the affair. Not about Lauren. About money. Years before Daniel and I married, my father had discovered that Daniel was involved in a business arrangement that had nearly destroyed one of his clients. My father had investigated. He had found evidence that Daniel had manipulated financial documents. But Daniel had somehow escaped legal consequences. My father wrote that he had confronted him. Daniel had denied everything. Then my father had made a decision. He would protect me. But there was more. My father had created a trust in my name. He had placed a significant portion of his business assets into it. The trust would become fully accessible to me after I turned 35. I was 39, which meant the assets were already mine. I stared at the page. How much? Karen took the document. She read the figure. Her expression changed. Are you sure this is accurate? What? She turned the paper toward me. I looked at the amount. My father's trust was worth more than I could have imagined. Millions. I sat down. 4 years. I had believed I was struggling financially. I had watched Daniel worry about bills. I had cut back on clothes. I had delayed replacing my car. I had believed our savings were modest. Meanwhile, my father had left me an inheritance worth millions. And I had never known. Karen looked at me carefully. Does Daniel know about this? I thought about the documents, the transfers, the company, the house, the forged signature. I suddenly understood. He must. But how? I looked at the letter. Maybe my father told him. Karen shook her head. Your father wouldn't have done that if he didn't trust him. I looked around the office. Then something caught my eye. A framed photograph sitting on a shelf. My father, Daniel, and Robert Hale, the same man from the photograph. I picked it up. There was a date written on the back. It was from 11 years ago, the year Daniel and I bought our house. My heart began racing. Karen! She turned. Look at this. She examined the photograph. That's the same man. Yes. Do you know who he is? No. Karen searched through the documents. Then she found a company agreement. Robert Hale's name appeared on it. So did my father's. And underneath them was another name. Daniel's. I stared at it. My husband had been connected to my father's business long before I ever knew. And suddenly, the story about Lauren didn't make sense anymore. Maybe she wasn't the beginning. Maybe she was only part of a much older plan. I called Daniel. He answered immediately. What do you want? I know about the trust. Silence. Complete silence. Then his voice became cold. Who told you? My father. Another pause. You shouldn't have opened that office. I felt my anger rising. Why? Because you don't understand what you're dealing with. I understand enough. No, you don't. Then tell me. He breathed heavily. Your father wasn't the man you think he was. I froze. What does that mean? You think he left you a fortune because he loved you? What are you saying? I'm saying that money came from somewhere. I tightened my grip on the phone. Where? Daniel didn't answer. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Ask Robert Hale what your father did to him. The call ended. I looked at Karen. Neither of us spoke. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. From Lauren. There was only one sentence. You need to meet me before Daniel realizes I told you the truth. I stared at Lauren's message. You need to meet me before Daniel realizes I told you the truth. For several seconds I didn't move. Then I showed it to Karen. She read it twice. Don't meet her alone. I wasn't planning to. Good. I looked at the message again. Why would she contact me now? Karen folded her arms. Because something changed. What? Maybe Daniel knows she's talking. I thought about his voice on the phone. The warning. The anger. The way he had immediately known I had opened my father's office. Something was happening faster than I understood. I replied to Lauren. Where? Her answer came almost instantly. Coffee shop on Madison. 6 p.m. Come alone. Karen didn't like the idea. Neither did I. But I needed answers. At 6 o'clock, I walked into the coffee shop. Lauren was sitting in the back corner. Without Daniel beside her, she looked completely different. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red. She stood when she saw me. Thank you for coming. I sat across from her. Tell me the truth. She swallowed. Daniel told me you would never find out. Find out what? She looked around before lowering her voice. The money. My chest tightened. What about it? Daniel told me the money belonged to him. I stared at her. He said your father had taken money from his family years ago. He said he was trying to get it back. I felt a strange mixture of anger and confusion. My father. Lauren nodded. He told me your father destroyed his family's business. I thought about Daniel's words. Ask Robert Hale what your father did to him. So you believed him? Yes. Why? Because he showed me documents. What documents? I don't know exactly. Financial records. Old contracts. Things with your father's name on them. I leaned forward. Then why are you telling me this now? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I found out he lied. How? 3 weeks ago. She took a breath. Daniel asked me to sign something. What? A transfer agreement. For the company? She nodded. He wanted me to transfer ownership to him. I stared at her. And you refused? I tried to understand why first. What did you find? She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. I found these. She pushed several copies across the table. The first was a bank statement. The second was a corporate filing. The third was an old legal document. I read the names. Robert Hale. My father. Daniel. Then I saw something that made my hands go cold. The date. It was from 12 years ago. 1 year before my father died. I looked at Lauren. Why is Daniel's name on this? I don't know. You must know something. She shook her head. I know he wasn't telling me everything. I turned the pages. There were records showing money moving between companies. Some of the companies were connected to Robert Hale. Others were connected to Daniel. But none of them seemed to have anything to do with Lauren. Why did Daniel put the company in your name? Lauren looked away. He said it was safer. For whom? I thought for both of us. And now I think he needed someone to take the blame. I stopped. What? She looked directly at me. If the company collapsed, the legal responsibility would fall on me. My stomach dropped. Daniel had been using her too. She wasn't the mastermind. She was another piece on his board. I suddenly understood why Karen had warned me not to focus entirely on Lauren. I looked at the documents again. Where is the original? Daniel has it. Then how did you get these copies? I photographed them. Why? Because I became scared. I couldn't blame her. I had been scared too. Then Lauren whispered something that made me look up. There's one more thing. What? Daniel didn't leave you because of me. I already suspected that. but hearing it from her made it real. He told me he was going to divorce you anyway. When? Months ago. My throat tightened. Before I knew anything. Yes. Why? Lauren hesitated. Because he needed you out of the house. I felt a chill. Why? She shook her head. I don't know. Then what does he need from the house? I don't know. I stared at her. Then she said, he was looking for something. What? I don't know. I leaned back. What was he looking for? He kept talking about something your father had hidden. My heart stopped. My father. Lauren nodded. He said your father left something behind. The room seemed suddenly quieter. What? I don't know. Did he ever mention the trust? Yes. I stared at her. How much does he know about it? Enough to be afraid of it. I thought about the letter. The trust. The millions. Robert Hale. Daniel's secret business dealings. Everything was beginning to connect. Then Lauren reached into her purse again. This is why I asked you to meet me. She handed me a small flash drive. I looked at it. What is this? Copies of Daniel's files. My pulse quickened. What's on it? Everything I could copy before he realized what I was doing. I looked at her. Why give this to me? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I finally understood something. What? She lowered her voice. I wasn't the woman he chose. I frowned. What do you mean? He never planned a future with me. She took a shaky breath. I was just supposed to help him get what he wanted from you. I closed my fingers around the flash drive. For the first time, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt pity. Not for Daniel. For the woman he had used to destroy my marriage. Then Lauren looked toward the window. Her face suddenly changed. What? She whispered, he's here. I turned. A dark SUV was parked across the street. I couldn't see the driver clearly, but Lauren recognized the vehicle. That's Daniel. My heart began pounding. Then we need to leave. Lauren grabbed her purse. We stood up, but before we reached the door, my phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. I told you to stop digging. I froze. Another message appeared. Now you're going to learn why your father was so afraid. I didn't move. Daniel's message was still glowing on my screen. Now you're going to learn why your father was so afraid. Lauren grabbed my arm. We need to go. I nodded. We left through the back entrance of the coffee shop and walked quickly toward my car. Neither of us spoke until the doors were locked. I started the engine. Where are we going? My lawyer's office, I said. Lauren looked at me. You trust her? Yes. Then go. As I drove, I kept thinking about Daniel's message. He knew where I was. He knew I had met Lauren. He knew I was looking into the past. How? Then I remembered something. Daniel had access to our phone account, our shared cloud storage, our home security system. He could have been watching me for weeks. I called Karen. I'm coming to your office. Are you safe? Yes. Bring Lauren. I glanced at her. She nodded. When we arrived, Karen locked the office door behind us. I handed her the flash drive. Daniel's files. She connected it to her computer. There were dozens of folders, bank statements, contracts, emails, scanned documents. Then Karen opened one labeled Project H. Inside were several files dated more than 10 years earlier. She opened the first. I saw my father's name. Then Robert Hale's. Then Daniel's. I leaned closer. The documents described a business dispute. My father had apparently discovered that Robert Hale's company was being used to move money through several shell businesses. Daniel had been working with Hale at the time. But the documents revealed something I hadn't expected. Daniel had secretly provided information to my father. He had helped expose the financial scheme. I stared at the screen. Wait! Karen looked at me. This says Daniel helped my father. Yes. That doesn't make sense. Karen opened another file. It was an email from my father to Daniel. The date was 12 years ago. The message was short. You did the right thing. I'll make sure she's protected. I felt confused. My father had trusted Daniel. At least then. So what had happened? Karen opened another document. This one was dated 2 years later. It showed that Robert Hale had sued my father's company. The case had been settled privately. Then I noticed something. Daniel had received a large payment. I stared at the number. Why did my father pay him? Karen shook her head. We need the complete agreement. We searched the folders. Nothing. Then Lauren spoke. There's another folder. She pointed at the screen. Emma. My heart stopped. Open it. Karen hesitated. I nodded. Inside were documents about my daughter. School records. Medical insurance information. A copy of her birth certificate. And one legal document I didn't recognize. I opened it. My hand started shaking. It was a life insurance policy. Emma was listed as the beneficiary. The policy had been purchased by Daniel years earlier. That seemed normal. Until I saw the amount. $5 million. I looked at Karen. Why would he have a $5 million policy? She didn't answer immediately. Then she noticed the date. The policy had been increased 6 months ago, exactly when Daniel had started transferring our money. My stomach turned. Is this why he wanted me out of the house? Karen looked at the document again. Maybe. But why? She opened another file. This one contained a letter from Daniel's attorney. The words blurred before my eyes. I read them again. Daniel had apparently been trying to establish legal control over certain assets connected to Emma. If I were removed from the picture, he would have much more control over the money. I felt sick. Lauren whispered, he was never leaving you for me. I looked at her. No. He was trying to separate you from everything. I closed my eyes. Then another folder caught my attention. Hale, 2014. I opened it. There was a scanned photograph. My father, Robert Hale, and Daniel. But this time, there was another person in the background. A young woman. I didn't recognize her. Karen zoomed in. Lauren suddenly went pale. That's his sister. Whose? Daniel's. I looked at her. Daniel told me she died years ago. Karen checked the document date. She was alive when the photograph was taken. I felt another piece of the puzzle shift. Why would Daniel lie about his sister? Lauren shook her head. I don't know. Karen opened another file. This one was an old deposition. And there it was. Daniel's sister had been involved in the original financial dispute between my father and Robert Hale. She had provided testimony. Then she disappeared from the records. I looked at Lauren. Where is she now? I don't know. Karen searched the internet. Then she stopped. I found her. My heart started pounding. Where? Karen turned the screen toward me. The woman was living in another state. And according to the record, she had changed her last name. But there was something else. She had worked for the same law firm that represented my father. I stared at the screen. Then I understood why Daniel had been so desperate to control the story. His affair with Lauren was only the surface. The money was only part of it. There was a much older secret involving my father, Robert Hale, Daniel, and his sister. And somewhere in those old records was the truth. Karen looked at me. We need to find Daniel's sister before he does. I nodded. Then Lauren's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her face turned white. Who is it? I asked. She didn't answer. The phone kept ringing. Finally, she picked up. Hello. She listened. Then her eyes widened. Where are you? She stood up. What happened? Lauren looked directly at me. It's Daniel's sister. I felt a chill. What did she say? Lauren slowly lowered the phone. She says your father didn't create that trust for you to inherit his money. I stared at her. Then why did he create it? Lauren's voice trembled. She says he created it to hide something from Daniel. And before I could ask what that something was, Karen's phone rang. She answered. Her expression changed instantly. Then she looked at me. Your house is being searched. My blood ran cold. By who? Karen listened for a few seconds. Then she whispered, Daniel. Karen's words echoed in my head. Daniel. My house. My bedroom. My father's old office. Everything suddenly felt connected. I looked at Lauren. Can he take anything? Karen shook her head. Not if we act quickly. She grabbed her phone and called the police to report unauthorized entry. Then she contacted an attorney who specialized in financial fraud. I sat frozen at the desk. Daniel was inside the house where I had raised Emma. The house he had promised to protect. The house he had tried to sell behind my back. Now he was searching it for something my father had hidden. Something important enough to risk everything. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was Emma. Mom. Her voice was shaking. My heart stopped. Where are you? At Aunt Melissa's. I exhaled. Good. Stay there. Mom, Dad came to the house. I know. He was looking through your things. What did he say? He kept asking where Grandpa's papers were. I closed my eyes. Did he find anything? I don't know. Then Emma said something that made me sit up. He was looking in your closet. My closet? Yes. Did he open the floor safe? What floor safe? I looked at Karen. I had never told Emma about it. Years ago, my father had given me a small metal safe and told me to keep it somewhere private. I had forgotten about it. Until now, I suddenly remembered where it was. Behind the loose wooden panel beneath my closet shelf. Karen, I whispered. She understood immediately. We need to get there before he does. But we couldn't. The police were already on their way. We waited. 20 minutes later, an officer called Karen. Daniel had left the house. He hadn't taken anything obvious, but the closet had been disturbed. When we arrived, drawers were open and clothes were scattered across the floor. I went directly to the loose panel. It was open. The safe was still there, but the lock had been damaged. Daniel hadn't managed to open it. I knelt down. My hands shook as I touched it. Karen called a locksmith. When the safe finally opened, I found 3 things inside. An old envelope, a USB drive, and a small key. The envelope had my father's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a single sentence. The money was never the secret. The secret is who it was meant to protect you from. I stared at the words. Karen took the USB drive. We should have this examined professionally. I nodded. Then Lauren noticed the key. What does it open? I didn't know, but there was a number engraved on it. 214. Karen recognized it. Hotel room. I looked at her. Maybe. We searched the key number online. It belonged to a private storage facility, not a hotel. My father's name appeared on the original rental agreement. The unit had been paid for annually. The last payment had been made only 8 months ago. By Daniel. My blood ran cold. How did Daniel know about it? Karen looked at the paperwork. He had access to your father's estate records. So he knew. Yes. Then Lauren whispered. He didn't want the money. I looked at her. What? He wanted whatever was inside that storage unit. We went there that afternoon. The facility manager checked the paperwork. The unit was still active. But there was a problem. Someone had tried to access it 2 days earlier. The manager showed us the security footage. Daniel. He had been there. But he hadn't entered. Someone else had used the key. The manager paused the footage. A woman walked toward the unit. I recognized her immediately. It was the woman from my father's photograph. Daniel's sister. I felt my heart race. She's alive. Karen nodded. Then the woman turned toward the camera, as if she knew someone was watching. She walked away. The manager gave us the unit number. We opened it. Inside were boxes, old business files, photographs, hard drives, and one large brown envelope. My father's name was written on it. I opened it. The first document was a copy of a contract between my father and Robert Hale. The second was a financial statement. The third was something I never expected to see. A letter from Daniel. But it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my father. I read it. Daniel had confessed that years earlier he had helped Robert Hale move money through several companies. My father had discovered it. Daniel begged him not to expose him. In exchange, Daniel offered information that helped my father recover part of the stolen money. But my father didn't trust him. He created the trust in my name. Not as a reward, as protection. Because he knew Daniel might someday try to recover the money. I felt tears in my eyes. All those years, I had thought my father simply wanted to leave me an inheritance. He had actually been building a shield around me. Then I found another document. This one changed everything. It showed that the money Daniel had been moving recently wasn't my father's money. It was my money. The trust had been legally transferred into my control years ago. Daniel had no claim to it, which meant all the documents he had been preparing were based on a lie. But there was still one question. Why had Daniel gone to such extreme lengths? Then I saw the final page. A handwritten note from my father's sister. It contained only one sentence. Daniel knows the trust contains evidence that could send him to prison. I couldn't breathe. Karen read it over my shoulder. Lauren covered her mouth. Suddenly, the affair, the money, the forged signature, the company, the house, everything had been part of the same plan. Daniel hadn't left me because he fell in love with Lauren. He had used Lauren as a distraction. He needed me to believe I was being abandoned. He needed me emotional, confused, willing to walk away. Because if I left quietly, he could take control of the assets and destroy the evidence. But there was still one thing I couldn't understand. I looked at Karen. If my father had this evidence all along, why didn't he expose Daniel? Karen looked at the documents. I think he was protecting you. From Daniel? Yes. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice spoke softly. Your father was right about Daniel. I knew immediately who it was. Who are you? A pause. Then she said, My name is Rebecca Hale. I froze. Robert Hale's daughter. Daniel's former partner. And apparently, the person who had been watching everything from the beginning. I know where Daniel is going next, she said. My heart began pounding. Where? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Your mother's house. Then the line went dead. I immediately called my mother. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. My heart began pounding. Karen, we need to get there. She nodded. Lauren stood beside me, pale and silent. What if Daniel is already there? Then we make sure he doesn't get what he's looking for. We drove to my mother's house as quickly as we could. The entire way, I kept thinking about Rebecca's warning. Your mother's house. Why would Daniel go there? Then I remembered something my mother had said. Years ago, after my father's death, she had told me that he left her something she was supposed to protect. I had assumed she meant the family photographs. Maybe I had been wrong. When we arrived, my mother's front door was open. Mom! No answer. I rushed inside. The living room was empty. A chair had been knocked over. A drawer was pulled out. Papers were scattered across the floor. Mom! I ran toward the hallway. Then I heard a sound from the kitchen. My mother was standing there. She looked frightened, but she was unharmed. Mom! I hugged her. What happened? Daniel came. My stomach tightened. When? About 10 minutes ago. Where is he? He left. What did he want? My mother looked at Karen, then at Lauren. Finally, she looked at me. He wanted the box. What box? She took a shaky breath. The one your father told me never to give you unless you were in danger. I stared at her. Mom, I'm already in danger. She nodded. Then she walked to an old cabinet. Behind several books was a small wooden box. She placed it on the table. I opened it. Inside was a key, a photograph, and a handwritten letter. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. I opened the letter. My daughter, if you are reading this, then I was right to be afraid. Daniel will eventually try to take what does not belong to him. My eyes filled with tears. I continued reading. But the money is not what matters. The evidence is. I looked at Karen. She moved closer. The letter continued. Years ago, Daniel helped Robert Hale move money through several companies. When I discovered what they were doing, Daniel came to me. He offered information in exchange for protection. I accepted his information, but I never trusted him again. The evidence I collected could expose both men. I stopped. My father had known. All these years, he had known exactly who Daniel was. Then I read the next paragraph. I placed the original evidence somewhere neither Daniel nor Robert would think to look. I turned the page. There was only one sentence. It is inside the house you built with Daniel. I stared at it. The house. Karen nodded slowly. But Daniel searched it. Maybe he didn't find it. I looked at the key inside the wooden box. A number was engraved on it. 217. My heart started pounding. Another storage unit. My mother shook her head. No. She pointed toward the photograph. It showed my father standing in our house. But not in the living room. He was standing in the basement. I looked closer. Behind him was a wooden wall. And on that wall was a small metal panel. I suddenly remembered it. I had seen that panel countless times. I thought it was part of the old electrical system. But it wasn't. It was a safe. Daniel had searched my closet. He had searched the bedroom. He had searched the office. But he hadn't searched the basement. Not yet. We returned to my house with the police nearby. I didn't want to go inside alone. Karen came with me. Lauren stayed with my mother. The basement was dark. I turned on the light. There was the wooden wall from the photograph. I moved an old shelf aside. Behind it was the metal panel. The key fit perfectly. The lock clicked. I opened it. Inside was a small black case. I pulled it out. My hands were shaking. Karen opened it. Inside were several hard drives, photographs, contracts, and one final envelope. My name was written across it. I opened it. My father's final message was short. I didn't protect you from Daniel because I believed he would leave you. I protected you because I believed he would eventually come back for this. Below that was one final sentence. When he comes, don't fight him. Let him believe he has won. I looked at Karen. What does that mean? She smiled faintly. I think your father knew exactly what Daniel would do. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. I'm coming home tonight. Another message appeared. We need to finish this. I looked at the evidence scattered across the table. For 17 years, I had been the woman who trusted him, the woman who believed him, the woman who begged him not to leave. But that woman was gone. I typed one sentence. Come home, Daniel. Then I pressed send. Karen looked at me. Are you sure? I nodded. For 17 years, he thought he knew me. I closed the case. Tonight, I'm going to let him believe that he still does. Because Daniel was finally coming back. But this time I would be ready. At exactly 9:17 that night, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked through the window. Daniel. He got out slowly. For a moment, I remembered the man I had married 17 years ago. The man who used to bring me coffee in bed. The man who promised he would never leave. Then I remember the suitcase. Lauren. The stolen money. The forged signature. And the evidence hidden beneath our house. I stepped away from the window. Karen was in the next room with 2 officers. The evidence was secured. Everything was ready. I had one job. Make Daniel believe I was still the woman he thought he could control. The front door opened. Daniel walked inside. He looked around. Where's Emma? At my sister's. He nodded. Then he looked at me. You look different. I forced a small smile. I haven't slept much. He walked closer. I didn't want things to end this way. I almost laughed. Instead I said, neither did I. He studied my face. Are you angry? Yes. I understand. No, Daniel. You don't. He looked toward the kitchen. Did you find anything? There it was. The question he couldn't hide. I lowered my eyes. I found some papers. His expression changed for half a second. What papers? Nothing important. He relaxed. I had him. Or at least, he thought I did. He walked toward the living room. I want us to handle the divorce peacefully. Of course. And I think you should sign the house over to me. I looked at him. Why? So I can deal with the mortgage. The lie came so naturally. I almost admired him for it. You already transferred money from our accounts, I said. His jaw tightened. I was protecting our finances. From what? From you making emotional decisions. I stared at him. You left me for another woman. He sighed. I knew you would make this personal. I took a breath. Daniel, did you ever love me? He looked away. I cared about you. That answer hurt, but not like before. Because now I knew the truth. He hadn't come home to save our marriage. He had come home for the evidence. I stood up. Do you still love Lauren? He gave a small laugh. Lauren has nothing to do with this. I smiled. You're right. He looked at me. Then why did you marry me? The question caught him off guard. What? Why did you marry me? He stared at me. I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Finally, he said, because I loved you. I shook my head. No. He frowned. You're confused. My father knew. His face went completely still. I continued. He knew about the money. Daniel's expression changed. What are you talking about? He knew about Robert Hale. Daniel stepped backward. I watched the color leave his face. You don't know what you're saying. I found the documents. His voice became sharper. Where? There it was. The truth. He didn't ask what documents. He asked where. I smiled. In the house. He looked toward the basement door. I knew exactly what he was thinking. Then he suddenly turned and walked toward it. Daniel! He stopped. You're not going down there. He turned around. For the first time that night, the mask disappeared. Give me the evidence. I stood still. You admit it? He realized his mistake. His eyes hardened. You have no idea what you're holding. Then tell me. You think your father was protecting you? Yes. He was protecting himself. You're lying. Daniel stepped closer. Your father stole from Robert. And you. I was trying to fix it. By stealing from me? His silence answered. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Not because I still loved him. Because 17 years of my life had been built around a man I never truly knew. Daniel looked toward the basement again. Where is it? I didn't answer. He reached for my arm. Before he could touch me, the living room lights came on. Karen stepped forward. 2 police officers followed. Daniel froze. Daniel Mercer. One officer said, "Step away from her." Daniel looked at me, his face filled with disbelief. "You set me up." I shook my head. "No." I looked him directly in the eyes. "You set yourself up." The officers moved toward him. Daniel suddenly laughed. "You think this is over?" I said nothing. He looked at me one last time. "You don't know what your father did." "Maybe not." I paused. "But I know what you did to me." The officers took him outside. I watched through the window as they placed him in the back of the police car. For 17 years, I had thought losing Daniel would destroy me. But as his car disappeared down the street, I realized something. He hadn't taken my life with him. He had only taken the illusion I had built around him. And once that illusion was gone, I could finally see my life clearly. But there was still one unanswered question. What exactly had my father been hiding? And why had Daniel been willing to destroy everything to keep it buried? I turned toward Karen. She was holding the black case. "We're going to find out," she said. I nodded, because for the first time in 17 years, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was ready for it.